Beautiful. Let's see, who do we have for attendees? Anybody we need to move over? Okay. Well, we'll go ahead and get started tonight. And I think a couple of other folks are going to join us. So I'm going to go ahead and call the Public and Legislative Affairs Committee of the Portland Board of Public Education to order. It is September 29th, 2025, and we're meeting all in a virtual format here in Zoom. My name is Sarah Lentz. My pronouns are she, hers, and I am chair of the board. And we will just popcorn around. Robbie, feel free to jump in introductions. So I'm going to call on somebody. You can introduce yourself and then call on somebody else. So Jane, Board Member Sawtelle, I'm going to pass it to you.
Hi, Jane Sawtelle, Board Member at Large. Grace?
Good evening, everybody. Grace Valenzuela. I am the Executive Director for Family Engagement and Community Engagement. And I'll pass it to Robbie.
Hey everybody, Robbie Feinberg, Director of Communications and Government Relations for the Maine School Management Association. Thanks for having me, and I'll pass it to Ryan.
Evening, everybody. Ryan Scallon, Superintendent of Portland Public Schools. And I will move over Fatuma right.
Beautiful. And we have board member Noor, who will be joining us in just a moment. And Robbie is here to give us an in-depth presentation on how the legislation process works in Maine and some more insight into advocacy and best practices. But before we do that, I do want to just take a beat to offer up public comment. I don't see anybody on the attendees side. But it is something that we like to do to just offer public comment in all committee meetings as well. So we'll just give it one more beat. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and close public comment. And so now I'm going to pass it over to Robbie Feinberg, who is at the MSMA, Maine School Management Association, and is newer to that organization, but has been a tremendous help so far in kind of understanding what's happening up in Augusta. And so after we formed this committee on the board for the first time this year, Robbie, you were the first person that we thought of who could maybe come in and give us some more skills and information on the process and the best ways for us to plug in to hopefully be able to be better advocates at the state level for public education here in Maine. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to you and just let us know if there's anything you need. So really quickly, board members, Robbie's going to do a presentation and then we'll have time for questions and answers. But Robbie, if you want us to chime in as we go, just let us know what you need from us.
Great. Thank you so much, Sarah. I'll share my screen in just a bit, but feel free throughout this presentation, interrupt me, raise your hand, anything like that. You are welcome to do that throughout this. This is pretty long, and there's also a few parts that if you want me to just skip through it, I tried to answer as many of the questions ahead of time that you all sent through in the presentation, so I'm hoping to be able to cover all of that. But if there's something that, you know, we're short on time, anything like that, feel free to just press through. But I'll get started. I think just sharing the presentation should be good enough. So I'll do that. And I think you all should be able to, this is what we were talking about earlier, seeing the little, myself in the right-hand corner here. But so I'll get started. So what I'm hoping to cover through this is giving you all a look at the Maine legislature, both looking at kind of a comprehensive look at how the legislature works, and then also how you can be effective advocates for your school district, the best ways of advocating for your school district, whether that's before the session, in the middle of the session, after the session, kind of the role that you can play, and kind of giving you a sense of the role, what we do, and then also how you can work with us. So in this, I'll give you a brief overview of what we're going to cover. So first, I'm just going to briefly talk about our organization, as well as what our advocacy looks like, what my role looks like at the legislature. Then we'll go into a bit about how the Maine legislature works, how a bill does ultimately become a law, what lobbying looks like and the steps that you can take. And then we'll also do a brief look at the latest on the current legislative process in Maine and what we're expecting in the next legislative session, which is coming up in January. So to briefly explain, so I want to first start with just about our organizations, because this is a thing that I think some folks, it can be very confusing to a lot of people. But so I work for the Maine School Management Association, and we, as you likely know, we do all kinds of services for local public schools across the state, policy services, insurance services, all that kind of work. And MSMA is kind of our main overarching organization. But then in terms of our actual advocacy, what we do is primarily, I am representing both the Maine School Boards Association and the Maine School Superintendents Association. And so these are our two main advocacy groups in what we do in Augusta. So the School Boards Association represents more than 1,700 school board members all across Maine. And it has been great to see some of you all, your school board members at our various different regional meetings, things like that. So I speak on behalf of that organization as well as our superintendents and assistant superintendents in the Superintendents Association all across Maine. And just as a brief explanation kind of my own advocacy and what I do, so the way that our process works is we actually have two different legislative committees for MSBA and MSSA, and they are comprised of school board members and of superintendents all across the state. And these committees meet every single week during the legislative session, discussing every single bill to do with public education. And then I basically take all of those positions that we do ultimately form from these two organizations, and then I bring that to Augusta and basically work with our own leaders to represent you all as local public schools and share our concerns and also the bills that we do want to see pushed in Augusta. So as a little explanation here, you can see me at a public hearing. What do I do? So the work really is on representing your interests in Augusta, as well as Washington. I also work with our federal delegation as well on that. So this is taking positions, messaging, and then a big part of my job, so Sarah mentioned this, is that I'm about a little more than a year into this role, but one of the activities that I'm really working on and I've really taken to Augusta is not just having it be me as the voice of our local public schools, or not having it be the voice of my bosses in Augusta, but really trying to make sure that our lawmakers are hearing from you as board members and as superintendents, and making sure that they are hearing the voice of our educators in Augusta. I hear over and over again from legislators that they care about hearing from their constituents. They care about hearing from the folks on the ground. And while it's great that I can help to represent your voices, they truly do want to hear from you. So a lot of what I've tried to do over the past year is to make sure that we can have superintendents going to the State House to talk about issues. We have had board members going to the State House or Zooming into different meetings and sharing things that way. So that's been a big part of my job as well, but I'm hoping to share a little bit about how you all can be active. And then the other thing that I do, and I hope you all have seen this, is sending out weekly updates. I send this out to all superintendents and board members across the whole state during the legislative session. So when that is going on, you'll get weekly updates from myself on what bills are going through the legislature and what action you can take. So talking a little bit about how does the legislature work? So I'm going to do this at kind of really starting from a basic level here, but the way that this works is that, as many of us probably know, Mainers, we head to the polls every 2 years, and as part of our process of electing, the governor, electing different national positions as well, we also are going to be electing our local legislators. So our most recent election was 2024, which is where we elected Maine's 132nd legislature, and basically electing our local representatives to make up the current legislature. Each legislature, it has 2 different sessions. So we just wrapped up the first session, and that ran from January to June of 2025, thereabouts. And then our next session will begin in January of 2026, and that's scheduled to run until April. And then we also have potential for some special sessions if those are called by the governor as well. So that tends to be how the legislature ultimately works. And again, if you all have any questions about any of this, just interrupt me, raise your hand, anything like that. Happy to do any further explanation that you would like on any of this. But we'll keep going forward for now. So what I wanted to get into a little bit is we're coming up on this second legislative session, and the rules are slightly different for each session. So the session that we just came off of, this was the first session, that is the session where it's really the free-for-all. It's really where legislators can submit any bills that they want to. We saw some legislators submitting 15 bills, 20 bills about all kinds of subjects. This led to around 2,000 bills in the last legislative session that we did see. There's no real formal limitations. And this leads to a situation that is just a little wild in terms of we just are dealing with, you know, hundreds of bills at any one time. I think our organization, we testified or at least submitted testimony on upwards of 300 bills in the last session. It's really enormous what we kind of dealt with because there are just so many bills that can be put forward. This upcoming session is going to be much different. And so I've got this kind of explained here on the slide, but the second regular session, bills are really limited by the Constitution. You can only have bills. So there are some bills that are going to be carried over from the last session to this session. But then in addition to those, you've got only bills around budgetary matters, bills from the governor, certain bills that are considered emergency nature, and those have to get approved by the Legislative Council, and then certain bills around studies or around ballot referenda. So basically, we're expecting far fewer bills this session. I would guess around maybe a couple of hundred here is probably what we'll see. And the actual date for that legislators had to submit all of those bills was actually on Friday. It was last Friday. That was the last day that legislators could really submit a lot of these bills, though there are often ways around that. But last Friday was really that last day, which means we should be hearing probably within the next month or so, I guess. We'll see the titles for all the bills, the new bills that we'll be seeing over the course of this next session. Now, in terms of what the makeup of the legislature looks like, so right now there's 151 districts in the Maine House, and the Maine Senate has 35 districts, and currently Democrats hold a slight majority in each of these chambers right here. So as you see, it's just a couple seats in the House. It's only a few seats in the Senate as well. And then the way that the House and the Senate really get things done is through these committees that I'm sure you all are aware of. So we have 17 different joint standing committees. Each of these committees have two chairs, one from the House, one from the Senate. And I'm not going to run down every single committee, but the ones that are really of interest to us, this is the Education Committee, the Labor Committee, Health and Human Services, we're there sometimes, Judiciary, State and Local Government, and then Appropriations. Obviously, that's important when you're talking about finances and schools. So those tend to be the main ones, but we have those 17 different committees, and they are really the ones that are going to be grabbing bills, shaping bills, things like that. I saw Ryan, you had your hand up.
Yeah, Robbie, recognizing that they seem to all be joint committees, how's the makeup of them beyond the two chairs?
Sure, it is oftentimes, so right now it is just because of the way that it's made up. I think each committee has roughly 3 senators and then about 10 House members. And at this moment, it's majority Democrat for, for each of those. But then it can, obviously, if the makeup of the full House or the full Senate changed, then it would go either ways. But like, I'll show you I have a little graphic showing the Education Committee coming up and kind of the makeup of that. And you'll see, I think we're about, 10 House members, 3 senators, and then it's, I think, maybe 8-5 Democrat to Republican. So, yeah, Sarah, I see your hand as well.
And who assigns the committees? Like, who makes that up?
That is going to be the Senate and House leadership. And so that's where right now that's Ryan Fecteau and Maddie Daughtry and their offices really coming together and saying, dividing things up. And there's a lot of process behind it too. Legislators are asking, hey, maybe I'd like to be on this committee. I'd like to be on that committee. So there's a lot of stuff that happens kind of on that end, but it's really the House leaders who help to shape this. And I also see Ali.
Yes, Robbie, thank you. District 2. A question that I have is, since there are only 35 people within in the Senate, that would mean that 2 people per committee, right? Because or is there 3 and then there's 1 on some ends?
Yeah, so what you wind up happening is you often will have senators who are on like 3 or 4 different committees, because you just need senators for committees. So like I think of, I'm trying to think if there are any good examples, but I know that there are some senators who are often kind of divided up in different committees, which isn't a great system because it means that they're probably, you've got a senator who's on one committee and maybe isn't actually in that committee room all that often, but that's kind of the way that they have to make it work. So it's not a great system, but that's why it's kind of divided up that way.
Okay, so and then for the House is 151, and do they all have one committee to attend?
I'm trying to think if there are any that stand out to me. I think most of them, I can't think of an example of a House member who is in 2 different committees. Well, there are some House members like Michael Brennan from Portland. He's on both the Education Committee and the Appropriations Committee. So there are a few examples like that, but most of the time it's just each House member is in one committee.
Okay, that's helpful. All right, thank you.
Yeah. Sorry that there's no like easy answer. It's always like, well, this person, but it's hopefully we can get as much clarity into this process as we can.
I got you. Yep.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Sure. So here's a little bit about what leadership actually looks like in the House and the Senate. So right now you have, and this is actually something I wanted to really highlight, as I'm sure you all are aware, Portland is in a very good position in terms of how they're represented in committees and in leadership right now. You see on the House side, the House Majority Leader is Matt Moonen from Portland. And then the others in the House, you've got Speaker Ryan Fecteau from Biddeford, Assistant Majority Leader Lori Gramlich, she's from Old Orchard Beach. And then you've got the 2 Republicans in leadership, Billy Bob Falkingham and Katrina Smith. And then on the Maine Senate side, you've got Jill Duson, who I'm sure many of you know, also from Portland. She's the Assistant Majority Leader. And then you've got Senate President Maddie Daughtry from Brunswick, Senate Majority Leader Teresa Peirce. She is from the Falmouth area. And then you've got the 2 Republican Minority Leader and Assistant Minority Leader, Trey Stewart and Matt Harrington there as well. So you see Portland is well represented both in House and Senate leadership. And then when it comes to just your legislators as a whole, we had a question around that. And again, you are well represented. It was actually interesting to me putting this together and seeing just the wealth of committees that Portland legislators really are on. You'll see here both, I mentioned Matt Moonen and Jill Duson, but you've also got Michael Brennan, who I mentioned, is on the Appropriations and the Education Committee. Representative Ed Crockett, also on the Education Committee there. You've also got folks like Charles Gold, he's on the Labor Committee, Sam Zager on the Health and Human Services Committee. You've also got Rachel Talbot Ross on the Judiciary Committee. And then I know Yusuf, I think a former member of this board at one point as well on the Housing Committee. So I think the message that kind of I took from here is that you all are in a very good position if you want to get legislation introduced, I would say. There's no thing to guarantee it, but you've got a lot of people who you could probably go to on a wealth of different committees who you could, potentially work with if you do want to get a policy pushed through or you do want to raise something. You've got a lot of people in a really good position around this. So hopefully that's you all may feel that way about this. I don't know necessarily, but that's kind of my takeaway. Sarah, I see your hand up.
Yeah, and this, you may hit this later, but I just wanted to ask, around bill creation, like how does that, like what does that pipeline look like? Because one thing that I've noticed is that we're not super included in the way that it's happening now, and so I just wonder, like, what is a normal process for the creation of bill before it's submitted to get in the other process?
That's a great question. And I do have, I think in like 1 slide from now, we're going to hit all that. I have an example of how this actually happened in the last session. So we'll get to that. Is there any other questions before we keep going? I think that's the next one. So All right, we'll keep going. Oh, so what I did want to hit on before we dive into that is actually a little bit about how advocacy can really begin far before the session even begins. So I think this is really important. It's what I share with school boards and superintendents across the state, is that if you don't have a relationship with your lawmakers, really trying to establish a relationship as early in the process as possible is a really important step to take. I'm talking, now or earlier when we're talking about things. This is 4 or 5 months earlier. There are a couple of ways that I know different school boards and different superintendents can approach this. One of them is by kind of making this informal. I know different school board members will just reach out kind of informally, sending an email or a call to different legislators, kind of approaching things that way. But another really effective way that I've seen, especially if you're doing just an introduction of a school board or a school to a new legislator, is really inviting them to a school board meeting. I know Bangor is a place that has actually done this really nicely, where they will hold school board meetings. This kind of committee might be a great format for something like that. I could certainly see, I don't know quite the best way for it, but inviting them and just having in an open meeting, allowing school board members and legislators to discuss different issues, letting legislators share kind of their own issues, the things they want to focus on, as well as you all as board members and superintendents and administrators and educators being able to share the things that you really care about. So this is a great way of, especially if you're just doing kind of an introduction, approaching things that way. In terms of messages you may want to share in a meeting like that, really focusing on statewide issues, really trying to focus on things, you can talk about federal issues, and obviously those are really important. But one thing you want to think about is, how do we talk about issues that our state legislator can really have an impact on? And then this speaks to, I think, part of your question, Sarah, and we'll go into it a lot more, but if you have ideas for legislation, those sorts of really early meetings are really helpful. Just getting the idea into a legislator's head. I've seen examples where just mentioning something very early in the process, 6 months before the session, just a little kernel can have a legislator go, okay, maybe we do need to work on that. And then they'll follow up, and then you work through it. And but starting that process really early, just even talking through potential legislative solutions or bills, starting that early can be really helpful. In terms of some other information you may want to share as well, if you're just talking to a legislator, information on, maybe demographic trends in your district, enrollment, funding, information such as absenteeism. I know that Portland in the past has put together a state of the schools report, and this is something that I think is a really good reference to show to legislators. I know Gorham does this. They work to show it, and I think being able to get that data, that sort of information to a legislator is really helpful. What this helps you to do is really share the story of your district with the legislator, really help them to understand, this is what it is like right now in our schools. This is what the situation is for our students, our families, our teachers, our administrators. So being able to provide that information, as well as talking about those kind of pressing legislative topics. And then the key is really, do not make that conversation, whether it's an introductory board meeting or something, don't make that the end of your conversation. Really work, whether it is a board chair, a vice chair, or others, really working to exchange contact information, really trying to keep it an open dialogue, whether that's inviting legislators to other meetings in the future, maybe having them check in every 3 months or so, or whether it's just something more informally of just being able to email or call a legislator every month or so. But the goal is really trying to open up an ongoing dialogue that you want to be able to have with legislators. And the goal of all of this, it's really to help to make your district the go-to resources for your legislature to rely on when it comes to public education issues. What you really want is, when they are deciding on a bill around something they may not necessarily know a whole lot about, they're going to reach out to you. They're going to reach out to, whether it's Ryan or Sarah or other folks in your district, about, really what they're seeing and how something would affect your district. So that's the real goal of starting that advocacy and lobbying work really early. And then this is what I wanted to go into a little bit about the actual bill drafting process. So as I mentioned, really trying to start that process early if you can, and how early advocacy can lead to success. So this is an example I grabbed from the last session of administrators and educators in MSAD 11 in Gardner. They began meeting independently. This was just administrators and teachers talking with each other, probably, I'd guess this was August or September of 2024. They were discussing the growing number of challenging student behaviors in their classrooms and basically looking at different ways that they could work to handle those challenging student behaviors. Through their discussions, they came up with some ideas for legislation and potential changes to state law. And their approach that they took, which proved to be really successful, is once they had talked through some of these challenges and had a potential bill, they had conversations with certain advocacy groups like the MEA, but they also drafted a real letter to lawmakers. They reached out to, so this is the Gardner area, they reached out to their local House representative, and basically said, hey, this is what we are dealing with as a school. These are the situations we're really dealing with, and we would like to work with you on some potential changes that we think can really improve this process for our district and districts across the state. This proved to be a really effective strategy, and it's one that I think I would really, and I think others would really advocate for, where if you as if a school, whether it's school board members or whether it's school leadership, can come together and say, hey, we've got an idea for this certain bill, we want to work on it. If we have an idea, let's reach out to our local lawmakers about this, and doing this before the session. So we're talking, this is probably 3 or 4 months before the session. So the result of that bill in Gardner, it was able to result in LD 1248, which was a bill that made some targeted changes that allowed educators to better respond to student behavior challenges. That passed overwhelmingly, and it is now law. And it kind of really serves as a good example for an approach that you all can take potentially as board members or as school leaders. And I have a little bit more about what this can look like. So, honestly, the approach of drafting a bill, bills can really come from anywhere. We see legislators coming up with their own ideas for bills. They can come from state agencies. They can come from organizations like my organization or a group like the MEA. They can come from commissions, and they can also come from individual citizens. Every single year, you will see bills that are just the result of one single person saying, hey, I think I want to see this changed. And they are able to get in touch with the legislator, and the legislator will submit it for them. That's honestly sometimes as simple as the process can be. The real key for you all as board members and administrators is getting and starting this process early. So coming up with ideas, if you have legislation that you want to see passed, starting that process, maybe even 6 months before the session or at the end of the previous session. If you have ideas for bills, reaching out to your legislators early. Legislators want to work with their constituents on this kind of stuff. They will work with you on submitting it. And often what this looks like is, you holding some meetings with a legislator, working to come up with different language that then they get submitted to the revisor's office in Augusta, and then who basically they take these ideas and turn them into actual like formatted legislation and that main draft language that you see there. And so that's really where a lot of this starts. And you can get started on that. The key is really just getting started early to make sure that you have some sort of bill that you can get submitted before that cloture deadline that I did speak about before. So in terms of when you're also working on that process, talking to legislators is really important. You are also free to talk with us, and we actually would love to be a part of that process if you all are thinking about that. We are routinely working on, I think the last session we had 7 bills that we worked on, and I think nearly all of them, we were working on them in association with local school districts. And what we can often do as MSMA is really help to both, whether it's connecting you with lawmakers hopefully you've already got connections, but we're happy to even kind of fortify those connections even more, but also help to find connections with other lawmakers, people on the education committee who may want to co-sponsor a bill, people on the labor committee who may want to co-sponsor a bill, things like that, just really helping to gain support for a bill or helping to provide insights in terms of what other districts are seeing as well. So that's really a role that we are able to play there and really help you through this process. Ali, I see your hand is raised.
Yeah, Robbie. If you could, the bills that have passed this past session,
Mhm.
that do affect the school, or our school district, in particular. Is there any possible way that you guys could, just share that if you have it?
I absolutely can, and I think that may actually be in the resources for this meeting. There's a web page actually that I've put together on our MSBA website, and I've got it kind of at the very end, I think, of this talk. That is a specific page, basically laying all that out there. I have a whole page saying what bills passed, what bills didn't, and kind of laying out the bills around public education. So I'm happy to share that afterwards too, if in case that didn't make it there. But happy to share that with you.
All right, sweet. Thank you.
Sure. So any questions on bill drafting, anything like that, happy to go to the next one. So, and again, I think the point I want to emphasize with this is that there's no like necessarily a science behind a lot of this. It's oftentimes it's working together as a board. It's working with other administrators and other education groups, but it's really it's both kind of coming together to discuss different ideas of how to deal with these problems, but it's also it can often be coalition building. It's finding the right groups who might be willing to come together on a bill and really work. And even that bill that I spoke about before from Gardner, part of the reason why that was able to get through is that groups like ours were in support of it, the MEA was in support of it. There were lots of different groups that were really kind of strongly advocating behind a bill like that. When you're able to get those number of groups that you know will support it, that makes it easier to really get a bill through that process. All right, keep going. So after a bill does ultimately get drafted, it ends up getting submitted and it goes through that revisor's office, like I talk about, the language is finalized. And then after that, the bill is then referred to a committee. And that's one of those 17 committees that I talked about there. And when it goes to a committee, each bill will then go in that committee process, will receive a public hearing from that committee. That's where any member of the public can attend and speak. If you're seeing news clips about a certain bill, you're probably seeing clips pulled from these sorts of public hearings at these committees. And then following that, a committee will work the bill. That's where they sort out concerns around a bill, really work to get further input from organizations or state agencies. They'll hold different work sessions around a bill to discuss changes or amendments, and then they will vote on that. And this committee process is really key for your advocacy here. Obviously, we went through a lot of what you could be doing before the legislative session really begins around advocacy, but it is in this committee process is really where a bill gets shaped. And this is where you can have the biggest impact on what a bill ultimately looks like that does ultimately get through the legislature. So I wanted to lay out here when we're talking about the committee process, what does the committee look like right now? And so I'm just going to talk about the education committee, but you see here, this is the 13 members of that committee. As I mentioned, you've got 2 members from Portland there on the left, Representative Ed Crockett, Representative Michael Brennan. You've got your 2 chairs, Senator Joe Rafferty from York County and Representative Kelly Murphy from Scarborough. And this is a good committee. They've been really good to work with. This is a group full of retired educators, many of whom have served as former board members like yourselves, board chairs. It's really a group that does have a real good knowledge of education. They've been good to work with from my perspective, and you've got a lot of folks with really good knowledge. So you all, in terms of your advocacy, know that when you bring up these concerns, they're going to folks who really do have a lot of experience in schools. And like I mentioned, you do have 2 different people from this committee from Portland. So you certainly have folks who you can reach out to and rely on and really be able to make a difference when bills do make their way through the education committee. Now, who else is involved in the committee process? Like I mentioned, it's groups like ours, it's groups like the MEA, the Maine Principals Association, lots of different advocacy organizations. You've got Educate Maine representing lots of different business interests. You've got the Maine Policy Institute representing kind of that free market conservative interest oftentimes. You've got groups like the Maine Children's Alliance. We also got a question about, does the city of Portland have a lawyer as well? I got that before this. And the city of Portland does have a lawyer. I was looking into it. I think you all contract with Bernstein Sure. There are a few folks from Bernstein Sure there who you work with. And so the city of Portland does routinely lobby on different issues. But I will say on education issues, we rarely see those lobbyists there. I think they're often more about real kind of those city council issues, less about those school issues. So we would love for you all to join us in some of that education work. There's a lot that is obviously going on in the education committee. So that's really where you can come in. So what advocacy looks like during the committee process. So I want to talk through a little bit about what you can do in terms of actual testimony, but I also wanted to let you know just about some of what we provide during the legislative session. Really, a key is staying informed and staying on top of a lot of these different bills during the legislative process. I was really impressed to see the legislative bill tracker that it seems like you all have developed yourselves. And I think that'll be really helpful for you all. And we have our own kind of bill tracker like that can hopefully help to stay up to date on what bills are making their way through. But there's just some things you can do. You can head to our website. You can go to the legislative advocacy section of the website to get information on when public hearings are, where certain bills are. We have routine updates on that. So we hope to just really keep you informed about the different bills making their way through the session over the course of the session. And hopefully that can help to inform your own advocacy and kind of what sort of bills you want to testify on. Now, in terms of what steps you can take and what you can really do. So during this committee process, when bills are there, your advocacy can be really crucial. One step that I'd encourage you to think about is, as a board member, as an administrator, really try to think through what issues you view as most important to your school district. Because it's very easy to get overwhelmed by these hundreds of bills that all do come through. There are so many different bills on so many different topics. What I always encourage people to do is to really think about the few specific issues that they really do think are most important. Maybe that's the funding formula. Maybe that is school construction. Whatever issues that matter to you, what you can do, whether it's as a board or as administrators, is really go, we want to prioritize this and we're going to focus on these specific bills during this session and really advocate for either getting a bill through or, maybe being against a certain bill, something like that, but really trying to maintain a focus if you can. Obviously, things can change throughout a session, but that's something we certainly encourage you to do. Now, in terms of steps you can take, and we'll go into this a little bit, the big steps you can take are, one, providing testimony, either going to Augusta, testifying over Zoom, or submitting written testimony. And then the other step that you can take is reaching out to your local legislators routinely during the session, whether through email or calls. They certainly are paying attention to talk about why you support or oppose. So I'll talk a little bit about what this looks like. So the most prominent way you can do this is testifying to a legislative committee. Sarah, I saw your hand. Do you want to jump into it?
I was just wondering if you
Yeah.
could share your 2 cents on like what is the most impactful of these choices, or kind of like, yeah, even if it's not the most impactful, like, is there a different impact of written testimony versus in person versus directly contacting the legislator?
Yeah, I think the most impactful, it's the one that requires the most amount of like work and driving, but it is going to Augusta and testifying in person. This is for a couple of different reasons. One is when you are testifying either in person or by Zoom at a hearing, you know that legislators are paying attention in that hearing. It's the one way that you know that legislators are hearing your voice. And so that's the most impactful. And I think really does make a difference. I routinely hear from legislators on certain bills in the last session who were saying, I still remember that one story from that one superintendent about this or that one teacher about that. And sometimes written testimony can kind of fall, by the wayside. It can just kind of end up in their folders. I still say it's worth it to do that sometimes, but I really do think that in-person testimony, specifically if you can go in person versus Zoom, that is the most impactful because oftentimes you're able to go and maybe find legislators will often pull you aside. I see it happen all the time. You really are able to get those connections in the state house with legislators. If you can't do that, I think Zoom testifying is still nearly as impactful. You are still making sure that your voice is being heard. It's just you're not able to make those kinds of, in-person connections at the state house that you don't see at the committee hearing that are kind of, people getting pulled to the side, that sort of stuff. But I think both of those ways are still the most helpful. And then the other piece is around, I think actually like written testimony can be helpful, and I think it's helpful to do that sometimes. But I actually think sometimes just reaching out by email to legislators is sometimes a better way of making sure that they um, are hearing you about a specific subject. I'll say like myself, I have often had more success by reaching out just by email to a committee and voicing our concerns versus just submitting recent testimony on that. So that about covers a lot of what I was going to get to in these next few slides. So I'll go quickly through these, but I will say, if just as a few general tips, if you can go in person to Augusta for a specific public hearing, some general tips are obviously arriving on the day of the public hearing. You'll have a little sign-up sheet most likely that you can fill out there. It's a very easy process, and you're always welcome to reach out to myself or other folks there. Maybe we're all happy to help people through that process who haven't done it. But an important thing is if you are going in person, try to remember to bring 25 copies of your testimony to distribute if you can't. You don't have to do this, but it really helps out the committee clerk, which they appreciate. So we always try to do this. But that's just a few general tips about that one. And then if you're going to testify by Zoom, it's very easy to go through this process. You can fill out this link you'll see here, and this is included in the resources that I shared with you all beforehand of just mainelegislature.org/testimony. You click on that link, and it will take you through an easy way of saying, okay, what public hearing do you want to testify on? You find it, you click through, and they will just send you a Zoom link right from there. It winds up being a very easy process most of the time. So, either way, they are both effective, but those are kind of the main tips for going about things that way. In terms of what you want to include in your testimony, whether that is in person or by Zoom, things you want to think about are focusing on local impacts. How would a bill impact Portland? What would it mean for students and teachers and programming and for your local taxpayers? Think about all of those different issues there, and really keeping the focus on those local impacts makes a difference. Sharing data can be really helpful, just on a financial impact, on an academic impact. Those can make a difference. And then stories can make such a big difference. And when we see this with all sorts of bills, but if you have specific examples of certain students or families or classrooms or programs that may be impacted by a bill, share those stories. Those are the sorts of information that it's only you all as school board members and community members and administrators, only you can really offer that because you are so connected to the schools. They really help to bring legislation to life. They help legislators to understand this is what this specific line in a piece of legislation would really mean for our kids, whether good or bad. And so those really do make a big difference. At the same time, you want to try to keep your legislation as short as possible if you can, limiting it to just a few minutes. And this is it's a hard task. I'm saying do all these different things at once, but if it's possible, keeping that stressing these stories, this data, but also keeping it short as well. That is a really important way of having powerful testimony that will resonate with legislators. Here's one example I did want to share of what positive testimony can look like and what I think a good piece of testimony can look like. I'm including, this is from the last session. This is actually from the superintendent up in the Fort Kent area, actually. And this is his testimony in support of LD 577. This was a bill around fully funding Maine's universal school meals program. As you can see, he doesn't share a whole lot in here. You'll see, I'll go through it. This is just 2 pages. There's not a whole lot, but he hits main points. He focuses on 1, introducing his district, laying out certain pieces of data. He says nearly half of students are economically disadvantaged in Madawaska. He highlights specific information to highlight kind of the issues the district is facing, talks about child food insecurity, talks about other issues in rural communities like fewer grocery stores, discusses the stigma when they don't have that universal school meals. So able to go into a few of those things, and then ends it by saying how positive universal school meals were for their school and why he wants it to continue, and urges them to approve that bill. And that bill that did get incorporated in the budget. But just incorporating that can really be effective in your own testimony. Ali, I see your hand up.
Yes, number 1, that's an incredible bill. It did pass and went to and it got funded, signed by
It
the governor.
did, yes. It was included in the budget, thankfully, so we didn't even have to worry about it as a bill. So we were very thankful for that.
Cool. Okay, sweet. And second thing is, you said 25 copies. I only used to bring like 15 because there's only so many. Why 25?
We recommend 25 if you can, because that ensures it gets to all the committee members, and then there are a bunch of like leftovers that can then, oh, sorry about that, that can then go to kind of like other folks in the room if they want it. So we always just recommend going to 25.
Okay.
15 probably works too. We just we just like to give extras. But either way works fine. You just want to have enough for every single member of the committee.
Right. Okay. Gotcha. Thank you.
Yeah, sure. So then we talk about written testimony as well. I think we already touched on that. This can be effective in some ways, but like I mentioned in others, sometimes this written testimony can kind of get lost. So putting something together, it's better than nothing for sure, especially if you just aren't able to make it to a meeting. You aren't able to make it to a public hearing. Yeah, so it can be effective. Same sort of rules apply, but not as effective as live or by Zoom, if you can go about it that way. And then I already discussed here around really emailing and reaching out to committee members directly, and really how that may be an even more positive and helpful way of going about getting your message shared versus that written testimony. You could also do both. That's the thing too. You could submit testimony online, and then you could go and submit this, send an email with the same sort of information to committee members to ensure that they see it. That's another way that you could approach it. But again, it's a helpful way. This sort of process keeps the line of communications open. It's another effective way of going about doing this. So you've got lots of different options during this committee process, but the important part is to really make sure that your voices are heard, especially about those bills that are so important to Portland and the area. Oh, I think we just got through. So I'm going to kind of quickly go through this next spot. I'm happy to go slower if you'd like, but this is a little more of the minutia in the legislative process. So once all of these committee processes happened, once there's been a public hearing, there have been work sessions, legislators have worked all of these different bills, they will then vote and put together a committee report on a bill. And this is basically, the way I like to describe it, is basically a strong recommendation from the committee. This is where each committee member decides, basically, do they support it? Do they feel that the bill should go through ought to pass? Do they feel that it should go through ought to pass as amended, a certain amendment that's been put forward? Or do they feel that it should be rejected and it ought not to pass? Many times we'll see a divided report, certain lawmakers who feel something should pass as amended, certain lawmakers who just feel a bill should be rejected. We very often see this for, controversial or contentious bills, and this will result in kind of a majority and minority report for a bill. But the end result is really you end up with this committee report, which is intended to really serve as a recommendation to other legislators of, hey, this is how our committee, we have heard all this testimony, we have listened, we have discussed it amongst ourselves, we have discussed it with other groups. Here's how we feel things should continue, and here's the legislation that we're bringing to you to vote on. That bill or those sorts of amended bills, things like that, are then brought to the House and Senate, and they're placed on the calendar once this report is put together and kind of wrapped up in this process. And that's when we go to kind of the full House and the Senate. What I talk about in the House and the Senate process is this. Oh, Sarah, go ahead.
Thanks, Robbie. I think this one is not going to jump forward to your next slide, but
Okay.
it's the ought to pass, ought not to pass. Is that from the individual's perspective, or is that like that the individual doesn't think it will pass? Does that make sense? Is it like an endorsement of the bill, or is it like a prediction of what they think will happen?
It's an endorsement. So it's them saying, I think this is a good bill, I think this is a bad bill, or I think this is a bill is good if it's amended this way, basically.
Awesome.
So,
thank you.
Yeah, sure, of course. Yeah. And so when this bill, this report, when these reports do go to the House and the Senate, this is where you wind up. Oh, I see another hand being raised. Ali.
Yeah, I'm sorry. So
No.
yeah, I mean, I've seen bills that have like 7 or 6 against 6, and it's losing, but it still goes to the floor. Do all bills still go to the floor, or is it there's like, if there's a severe majority, like 9 out of 3, 9 against 3, and it fails in committee, does it still go down to the floor, or does it die there?
So the only bills that don't go to the floor is if it's unanimously rejected in committee. If every single member of the committee says this bill ought not to pass, then that bill will just be considered dead. It will be done for. But if even one member of the committee votes ought to pass or ought to pass as amended on a bill, then it will go for a floor vote. So we saw this in the last session. There were routinely cases where it was like a 12-1, but just because there was that one person who wanted to see a bill go through for whatever reason, it still had to have a floor vote. So
Okay.
yeah, so even if it is overwhelming, 9-3 or 10-1 or something, it still does make its way to the floor unless it is that unanimous vote.
Okay, sweet. Thank you.
Sure. So this process, when it does get to the House or the Senate, is can be really unpredictable. It's often really difficult to know when exactly a bill will go up for a vote. It can sometimes happen really quickly. There can be a committee report put together very fast, and it goes, within the matter of a week out of committee and to the House floor. Or sometimes it can go really, really slowly. So this can make for a really unpredictable process and can make it difficult to know necessarily how to advocate. We work to keep up with this. I'm routinely in kind of discussions with legislators as well as like committee clerks who are the ones like working on these committee reports to try to guess at that. And we can, if you're interested in a particular bill and when it might go to the actual House floor, feel free to reach out to us and we can try to work with you to get that sort of information. You're welcome to do that. But on the whole, it can be an unpredictable process for everyone. Even legislators themselves often sometimes don't know exactly what day a bill will make it to the floor. But what can you do while you're waiting for a bill to move through the chambers? This is a really important part of the legislative process, particularly if it's a bill that you care a lot about. After a bill has gone through committee, after there's something that has come out of committee, reaching out to your local legislators, especially legislators who may not be on that specific committee, legislators who may not be on the education committee, reaching out to them, sharing your support or opposition for a particular bill that you may feel is a real priority. That can be really helpful because if you have a legislator who hasn't been on that particular committee, they probably just haven't been a part of a lot of those really deep discussions that are often had around these bills. They may not know necessarily why a bill was rejected. They might not have heard the real reasons why a bill was, voted to approve or things like that. So they're not privy to a lot of those discussions, which means that they may vote one way or the other. So if you can talk to your legislators about this, if you can share that sort of information, sending them emails or maybe even calling them about why they should be supporting or opposing it, that can make a big difference in the House and the Senate. And just doing this kind of throughout the process can be really helpful. Information you will want to share are things like, sharing the exact bill number, sharing the specifics on the impacts of your bill, talking about the facts around that bill, any of those sort of information, but getting that to those legislators can be really helpful. It's nice to hear that many legislators, they still want to hear from their constituents on these bills, and they want to know exactly what you all feel and how you feel they should be voting. So your sort of impact and your advocacy really does make a difference at this point. And then we also wanted to add as well that we occasionally will send out what we call kind of full court press emails, our organization, where we're asking basically schools across the state to oppose a bill, to support a bill, and to reach out to their local legislators if it's a bill that we feel like would have a really big effect on public education. We don't do this much. It's maybe 3 or 4 times a session, but it's really helpful for us if you are able to kind of join us in those sorts of efforts as well. The other option that you have in terms of advocacy, and this may seem a little old school, but it's actually still shown to be pretty effective, are letters to the editor. I still often hear that legislators, they like to read and they respect their local paper. And so writing these, a little letter to the editor can be really effective. I have an example there of a former clinical counselor working in Maine schools who wrote a letter to the editor about why there needed to be more mental health services. It's a good example of just putting together a short, maybe 1 to 2 paragraph letter saying, hey, this bill is going through. Here's why I, as a school board member or administrator, here's why I think that it's a good bill that I feel like would make a difference for our schools. Putting something like that together can be really helpful and can sometimes make a difference and can help to add publicity onto a bill that it may not be getting otherwise, and can kind of share the information about a bill beyond the legislative process. So that is a good process. And then here I include a little example of, what a letter to the editor might look like, examples of just keeping it short, but including, information about a bill, including information about, okay, telling someone, please encourage the representative to vote against it, things like that. So that's another strategy that you can certainly take. Now, once bills do get to the House and Senate, the House and Senate will then vote on nearly every single bill. And then how it plays out, if both the House and the Senate ultimately vote to reject a bill, that bill is dead. If the House and Senate disagree on a bill, if one of them supports it, the other one disapproves of it, they will have to work out their differences. And if they can't, then the bill does eventually die. But if a bill is able to get approval, it will go back and forth between the chambers a couple of times. Probably it'll get a total of maybe 6 votes total between the 2 chambers. And if it is able to get through all of those, it will then, if it is a bill that is not about funding, it will go to the governor. But then I know we received some questions about appropriations and funding, and I'll try to keep this short because it can get into details. But if it is a bill that does need some funding, it will then head to what's called the appropriations table. And we'll talk about that. I'll try to be as, concise as possible with this. But basically, if a bill costs money, it can be funded in one of 2 ways. It either gets included in the state budget, or it will get placed on the appropriations table, and then the appropriations committee will choose whether to fund it or not after the state budget happens. The sorts of bills that do go to the appropriations table, bills that affect state revenues or expenditures at all, they will go to the appropriations table, even if it is just $1,000 in this one area, even if it's just a study that'll cost $500, that will still go to the appropriations table. So we wind up with hundreds of bills on the appropriations table. The other sorts of bills that end up there are bills that get deemed mandates on local operations. So according to the Maine Constitution, if a bill does get deemed a mandate, it must receive at least 90% funding in order for local school districts and local towns to actually have to follow it. So if it doesn't get that funding, then we're actually not really under obligation to follow it, though many times we do. But because of that, these bills that are deemed mandates, they get kind of mandates from certain from like the Office of Program and Fiscal Review those will also go to the appropriations table where they ask for funding to help support these sort of mandates. So in the last session, hundreds of bills ended up on the appropriations table, and many actually still remain there because they didn't get funding. In order to get a bill off of the appropriations table, either it has to get included in the state budget, or once the state passes the budget, it will determine how much money is ultimately left over, how much is still there in the coffers that the legislature has to pay. And the Appropriations Committee will then run the table. This means they will choose from all of these different bills on the appropriations table and determine which ones to fund, or they will work to amend the bills to maybe make them cheaper so that they are able to ultimately get through. Once they're removed from the table, the Senate will then decide to enact them, and then they will go to the governor from there. This step is often the biggest step that keeps so many different bills from becoming law, especially those that do cost a lot of money. If you are in real support of a bill that ends up on the appropriations table, you'll want to contact your local legislators about it, but you'll also want to contact the Appropriations Committee about it. You do in Portland, you do have Michael Brennan. He is on the Appropriations Committee, so maybe reaching out to him if there is a bill that's stuck on the Appropriations Committee that you want to see passed. But also you can reach out to the committee as a whole and really push them to pass a certain bill. But this is really where so many different bills get stalled is at this Appropriations Committee process. Once everything moves through here, it then goes to the governor, and the governor can allow a bill to become a law with or without her signature. Either way, the bill will become law, or the governor can choose to veto a bill, and then the legislature could overturn that veto if it wants to. If it gets 2/3 majority in both chambers, it can overturn a veto from the governor. And then bills become law 90 days after the conclusion of the legislative session. So we just had bills, I think, maybe it was 10 days ago that they became law. I saw a few questions or a few hands raised there. Ryan, I think I saw yours first.
Is there any way that the governor can move something off of the appropriations table that doesn't have the appropriations committee do it?
No, not really. It really has to be the Appropriations Committee that does that work. The governor's real only role, I mean, the governor's role is often around like in that, backroom negotiation process. The governor can really push to say, hey, I want to get this thing off and, all those sorts of negotiations. But really, the governor doesn't have much of a say there. It's really up to the legislators to determine what is going to ultimately pass and what isn't and what's going to get funded. And then the governor can choose to say yes, but it's a limited authority. So, and then Ali, I saw your hand raised as well.
Yes. So yeah, that's a big thing with the appropriations. I had a bill that passed for $20 million towards DHHS, and they just did not fund it. And it died at the appropriation table. So thank you for telling us that. My question is, there's like, for example, there's a current bill that's on the governor's desk, and she hasn't signed it yet. So it's about immigration. But and she's not vetoing it. So what you said, with or without a signature, if she doesn't sign it, does it die or does it just become a law?
You are testing my knowledge of the legislative system, because this is a very difficult, tough to know what happens here. I think what would happen in that case is she does have to sign it. is my understanding with a lot of these different bills, that there, I wish I could be clear about this. There's a weird thing that happened because this is happening between the two different legislative sessions. There are weird rules that are going into place with some of these bills. Like there has to be like 10 days where the governor can sign or not sign something, but because of the current session, there aren't going to be those 10 days. It's a weird process. So I'm not able to speak for sure. I think she would need to sign it for it to become law, but I could be wrong on that one. And you all could let me know if I'm wrong on that one. I had an answer to some of these like a month ago, but this is we're in a really weird position with some of these kind of what the governor can do with a few of these bills. So I'm sorry that's not a great
No,
answer,
it's
but
okay.
it's weird. It's
Yeah,
weird process. Yeah.
yeah, I asked one of the legislators that I talked to, but um okay, I'll try to figure, I'll do some research and try to figure that out, because that's it's just, it's pretty important, because sometimes the governor doesn't want to sign, or does want to sign, but because it goes out to the public and it's like you're not for this or you are for this, and it's they're rerunning or whatever it is, so
Yeah.
on how it looks, how they're gonna look.
Yeah. Well, I'm guessing a bill like that. I know there are a few others like that one as well, where I think she may have a few days at the beginning of the next legislative session to like sign it or veto it. But my guess is that if she hasn't taken action yet, they're probably trying to work on something is my guess. I know that's the case with a couple other bills, is they're trying to kind of work through the bills a little bit to see if they can amend them or something like that. I don't know if that's happening with the bill that you were referring to as well, but I know
Oh,
obviously, yeah.
yeah, Sarah just killed it. That's an incredible thing you just put into the chat, or into the notes, whatever it's. But yeah, thank you.
Oh, amazing, Sarah. Yes, thank you so much. This is yeah, no, this Sarah's got it covered. We're good. We're good.
No,
So
I've had to look it up like 50 million times because I can't keep track of all the carve outs, right? So
I
I
know.
just yeah, I hear you.
I need to just memorize that page because yeah, just, there's so many, especially when we're in between sessions. It's so difficult. So anyway, thank you all. Glad we could work through that together. So so I'll keep going. We've only got just a few more slides on this one. But I mentioned I just want to talk about a little bit how we can help to keep you informed through this. So we've got several different tools. We've got our regular email updates that go out to you all as board members and administrators. You should be getting those. Those also have links to, we have a legislative dashboard, which is attached to those links. And I have, at the end of this slide, I have links to our legislative dashboard as well as different videos that we put out. So you automatically get these as board members or administrators. So you can use these to kind of just stay informed over the course of the legislative session. And we also had questions about actually using the legislature's website and like searching for bills. So the best way to go about doing this is you head to legislature.maine.gov, and if you want to search for a specific bill, you'll hit that button on the right there that says full bill search. And you click on that and you will wind up, you can search through bills right on this page here. You can search by the LD number of a bill. So you can put it, if you know that it's, you see right on the right there, it says LD number range. You can search for like LD 1400 and you just put that in and you can find the bill that'll pop up below. But also if you just know the title or what the bill is about, you can search for it in this system as well. And that's a good way of going about and searching through all of the different bills. And when you do that, I'm just highlighting, I just pulled up a random bill from the session. You will get lots of information about these bills. It will tell you the action that the committee has taken on the bills. It will show you the original bill, how it was amended. It will show you the different pieces of testimony on bills, scheduled meetings, the actions that the House and the Senate took, the sponsors. There's a whole lot of information here that this site will really be able to provide you with. If you ever are struggling to find a specific bill, please reach out to me. During the legislative session, I'm probably on this website 8 hours a day. So like I know it very well. So feel free to reach out to me if you ever are trying to search or can't figure out something. I'm happy to help you through that process as well. And then finally, you all have sat through so much of this. We just want to briefly cover what we're expecting in the forthcoming year, and I'm happy to take any questions as well about what we're expecting in the next session. So the biggest issues that we are expecting to come are, one is a big one around school funding and EPS. So we're going to be seeing continued work from MEPRI, the Maine Education Policy Research Institute. They were directed from the legislature at the end of the last legislative session to provide recommendations for particular changes that could be made to the EPS funding formula. So either changes to things like the regional adjustment in there, which helps to determine how much teachers should get paid, special education costs, potentially looking at changing that formula for how special education works, looking at economically disadvantaged weights. So basically looking at whether districts who have more economically disadvantaged students should be getting more of a weight, more funding for the percentage of students there. Even looking at updated pure pupil amounts in the formula. So basically, there was a lot of discussion about our schools are having to pay for a whole lot of stuff that we didn't have to pay for before, whether that's staff supports, whether that is social workers, things like that, that often really aren't included in the EPS funding formula. So they're looking at potentially updating the per pupil amounts to take into account a lot of that. There's a big report that's going to be due in January on this big issue. And that will really serve as a basis for some potential changes that we could potentially see in the funding formula. You are welcome to share your opinions about that now if you'd like to with your legislators. We are having some discussions, but it really won't be until January that we really see things to come. But I know Representative Brennan has been really working hard on this for a number of years and has been, I mean, really for nearly his whole career in the legislature, he's been working on this issue. So I'm sure he would be happy to speak with you all about that. Another big issue is school construction. So the governor has a commission on school construction looking at how to better fund school construction in the state, how to make our school construction system a whole lot better and work better for our schools and communities so that we aren't having to really rely on bonds that, we know so many districts are not able to afford to pay for school construction. So looking at better ways of funding school construction across the state. This commission that's been meeting for about a year, this governor's commission on school construction, they're expected to have a report that'll be coming out by the end of the year. And then we may be seeing some action in the legislative session around that issue of school construction. We've also got a few other commissions that are meeting. They're discussing the Maine learning results, actually looking at if kind of the learning results need an update, looking at issues around how to increase graduation rates, particularly for certain populations like students who are homeless, foster care, looking at those sorts of populations. There's also a commission talking about compensation for student teachers. There's work going on around rulemaking on updated teacher certification. And then there are a few other bills as well that have been carried over, and we're expecting to see more bills that will probably be coming in over the next month or so as well. So those are the big topics that we are expecting, at least in the Education Committee. We're likely be seeing a whole lot more. I'm happy to talk through anything else if you have questions on those sorts of issues as well. Feel free to raise your hand. And then I just wanted to highlight at the end of this, we have on our own website, and Lee, I think this is what we're talking about. I'll share a link to you all after this. This is straight from our website. We have a whole big spreadsheet detailing where, all the different public education bills that became chaptered law, when they were signed, links to them, when they've gone to be effective. And so that's right on our MSBA website. I'll share a link to that so that you can see where kind of all these different bills are currently in the legislative process. And then here are just a few more other helpful links. You can find that in the resources that I shared as well. That should be in the packets and online as well. So I think that's everything that I have. Please reach out with any questions you might have. You've got my email right there. There's my cell phone number. Do not hesitate to call me. Happy to help out in whatever way that I can with these issues. Yeah, I really appreciate speaking with you all. Thank you all for your great work as school board members. It is such a hard job right now, and we are so thankful that you all are doing this. I'm happy to take any other questions as well, but I'll stop sharing.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Robbie. I had one question, and then anybody else that wants to jump in, please do. I am curious, kind of with the tensions that are happening right now with the federal government, kind of the role that MSBA is playing there or hopes to play over the course of this year and future years, and how we could either engage in that or yeah, I guess that's my question. Like, do we see MSBA playing a role with the federal policies that are coming down, and can we engage in that as well?
Yeah, we've been involved, particularly when it comes to a lot of the funding issues that we've dealt with. I mean, when there were holding title funds, it was actually I was in Washington with Eileen King, our the MSSA executive director, and we were advocating and meeting with offices. So we are doing a lot of that work. And we are a lot of that work right now is kind of we're as things come, we are responding as quickly as we can to that, but we're kind of just trying to go, I guess, kind of like incident to incident might be a way to put it with a lot of this different stuff. You don't know the best way, but we are certainly engaged in a lot of that work and certainly in touch with our a lot of it is conversations with our delegation, and we were very involved, particularly with the Big Beautiful Bill Act when that happened, the big reconciliation bill. We were specifically talking with our delegations quite a bit about the school voucher proposal that was included in there. We were talking about the cuts to Medicaid that were included there, the cuts to SNAP, and how those have an effect. We are a lot of that is, we're reaching out to different districts and school board members. But if you would like, I am happy to, Sarah, to reach out to you all and try to see if you all want to be involved in some of that work as well. So if that would be helpful for you, I'm happy to, maybe send emails to you and Ryan and keep you both kind of informed as we continue some of our work on that.
Yeah, that would be really helpful. And just like one ask while we have your ear here is, I think that we would be interested in like building a coalition of other school boards who might be interested in the same kinds of issues. So if you do hear of other interests from other school boards, please feel free to connect us or let me know and I can reach out to them.
That's a great thought. Yeah, no, I'll reach out to you after this, Sarah, about
Okay,
that. I think that sounds great.
Perfect. Any other questions from folks? I'm just
No, but
super.
yeah,
Oh, go ahead.
yeah, no, thank you for your presentation. That was like, yeah, top. That was great. Like the way you explained it and all that. Thank you, man.
Of course. Thank you all so much for bearing through this after so many meetings. So I appreciate it. And again, really, my email is open, my cell phone is open. So like reach out if you have any questions, if you need anything legislative wise. I am happy to help you all through that. But because you all are in a good position in terms of if you want to make change happen or you want to get things. So happy to help out in whatever way I can.
Yeah, thank you, Robbie. And just for this session and also just generally your responsiveness, it has been really easy to work with you. And this presentation, I think, just like really firmed up a lot of things in my head. So I just look forward to working with you alongside this committee for this year.
Sounds great. Thank you all so much again.
Beautiful. Okay. Anybody else? Last chance? Okay, perfect. Thanks so much, Robbie.
Great.
Have a good night.
Thank you. You too. Bye.
Beautiful. Do you think we have 10 minutes, Superintendent? Do you want to try to do community engagement, or you want to wait and do it tomorrow night at the board meeting and superintendent remarks?
Why don't we do it tomorrow at the board meeting? It's apropos for everybody on the board.
Okay,
and so
perfect.
I'm happy to do it in superintendent comments tomorrow.
No, that sounds great to me. And I'm just double checking that. Oh, I'm in the wrong agenda. Do we have anything else on the agenda? That's what I'm trying to just double check.
We do not.
Great. Then I'm gonna move to adjourn. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Board Member Ali. All those in favor? Raise your hand. Okay, beautiful. It's unanimous. So we're going to adjourn at 8:50. And I will see you all tomorrow night, hopefully for dinner and then the board meeting.
Dinner is at 5, right?
5:15.
5:15.
Yeah.
All right, I'll be there at 5.
Yes, for you, 5. Yes, perfect. Okay, see you soon. Bye.